Today I have Theresa Kushner and Doug Laney with me. Theresa is currently a consultant for AI and analytics with NTT Data, and Doug is the author of Infonomics, as well as the principal of data and analytics strategy at Caserta. So I'll let each one of you fill in some other things people may or may not know about you. Theresa, what should people know?
What should they know? One of the things I thought about when you asked that question earlier at a point was the fact that I think I'm most noted for applying analytics. I came to this world of analytics by virtue of journalism, so it's a very sort of convoluted path. But over the years, what I've acquired is the ability to help manage analytics people who do incredible work if they're given the right kinds of environments to succeed in. So through all of my engagements, that's what I'm most noted for, is helping the analytics, the data scientists of the world, and the guys that do analytics do their job.
Yeah, I would assume that journalism is not your typical path to data and analytics. So
don't think so.
It gives you a unique lens and a unique flavor on it all.
I always tell people, though, that it's a really good background, it's a good background for law, it's a good background for everything, because it teaches you how to ask questions and then listen to the answer. And that's a skill set that everybody needs.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. And Doug, what should we know about you?
Well, I kind of went the opposite direction. Now I'm into journalism.
Oh, there you go. There you
go. I write for Forbes now and some other journals in addition to the day job. So, let's see. Most of the last decade, I was a senior researcher and advisor with the IT research and advisory firm Gartner. And I helped form and lead the chief data officer research and advisory team there. But felt the call of consulting again. I wanted to take some of these ideas that I'd been researching and wrote about in my book and put them into practice to help organizations think about how they can monetize and manage and measure information as an actual corporate asset. Everybody talks about, data as an asset, but very few companies actually behave as if it's an asset, meaning, measuring it the same way that they measure other assets and managing it with the same discipline as even their office furniture. Mm-hmm. So that's what I've been kind of after and are building a consulting practice here at Caserta to help organizations again treat their data more as an actual asset. As far as AI goes, I have a background in expert systems dating back to the early 90s and some of the pioneering companies there. But have moved more into the data and analytics world over the last couple decades.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to get into it today. I, on the contrary of the both of you, fairly new to this space in this world. So, doing these types of interviews is a great opportunity for me to ask the questions I'm coming upon in my curiosity and, learn from some veterans and experts like yourself. Mm-hmm. And the main theme today, the one I want to address, is the talent gap that we see today and what folks like Gartner are projecting in the future. And some of the information is actually pretty surprising and contrary to what I would have guessed. And for a little more context, in my day job, I see and talk about the tech talent gap all day, every day, because we are working to close that gap through education and upskilling and reskilling folks and telling the story of you can't hire your way out of this problem. You're going to have to empower and help people to learn new jobs. And so when I heard that in a recent Gartner report, they're projecting by 2025, so just 5 years away, the talent gap when it comes to data scientists will no longer be a challenge because 50% of those jobs will be automated. That was pretty shocking to me, and something I hadn't heard before. So, with that as the backdrop, how would that actually work? What are the components that Gartner is referring to, or what come to mind for you that are pieces that could be automated, and which ones inevitably will still need to be a human?
Well, I guess as the former Gartner analyst, I'll make a stab at it.
Yeah.
They're probably referring to the main component, or at least the one that everybody thinks about when we talk about data science, and that is you're developing complex algorithms. But as we know, and Theresa and I will talk about, there's a lot more to data science than that. There are components related to curating and identifying and integrating new data sources, to cleansing those data sources, to preparing them, setting up analytic workspaces, and there's a lot of back-end data stuff that needs to happen as well. Many of that today still remains quite manual, whereas the role of developing algorithms is eking more and more toward unsupervised kind of machine learning. So perhaps when Gartner talks about a lesser need for data scientists in the future, that is probably what they're referring to, in that we're starting to see much more machine learning that can operate on itself in a more unsupervised manner.
Yeah, I think I quite frankly see a lot more of advances in the data management than I've seen in the last couple of years. And so, we all know that 80% of what they do from a data science perspective is in that getting the data set together and managing it in a way so that you can apply an algorithm. But we've got tools nowadays that are coming along incredibly well at taking and managing that data together. Now, they don't do the one thing that I've asked every one of them about every time I've seen these tools, is that when you make changes to the data set and you want to make sure that the data is clean again, you can't push it back to the source it came from. So there's some things that we're seeing that are automating a lot of the work of a data scientist. The algorithms and the other areas, they're also got some great tools. Everybody's got sort of the same algorithmic set that they're working from, whether it be Google and the cloud, whether it be any other kind of tool that's out there to support it. So data scientists are really good about automating their own work. So that's what I think Gartner's saying when they say in 5 years, we're not going to need the same kind of heavy lifting data science capability that we have today. We're going to need something different. We're going to need people who can finesse the algorithms, who understand how to apply them in today's business environment. That's a much different person than a data scientist sometimes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. A couple of things come to mind in what you were both saying. One, and I should probably take a step back. So one of the big goals of this podcast is to speak about some of these things in a way that matter to everyone, not just another computer science or deeply technical podcast. For one, I'd be a terrible host if that was the goal, but also, what's the real world implication for the average person? So with that being said, I'll quickly give an example as I understand it of machine learning as it typically is done today. And it involves tagging data. And the example that made sense to me was there's pictures of cars or cats or whatever it is, and you need 1 million of these photos, and this one's a cat, that one's not a cat, and you teach the machine this, and then it can go out and identify cats or cars or whatever in images. So with that as a very basic example, it seems that most of the machine learning, or if not all today, is very narrow, and the machine knows what it's been taught. And to me, what I'm hearing is, as pieces of that can be automated because the machines are being taught it and know how to process the data better, it's going to take the humans to zoom out a bit and be able to do the other pieces with context and that take multiple disciplines and multiple domains, because that's what machines can't do now or really in the foreseeable future, is to take different things into account and make decisions involving multiple variables, so to speak. Is that a decent summary? I know I'm
Yeah, they're getting pretty close to.
Are they?
Getting pretty close to doing that. Like machine learning, the learning part's true. I mean, you can set an algorithm out there, and over time, with the data that it's presented, it may learn something entirely different, may learn something new, and may act differently. That's why I think data scientists are going to be hard charge to go in and become explainable AI people. In other words, they're going to have to explain what happened when that algorithm hit a certain amount of data and all of a sudden acted in a completely different way. That's a different skill set than creating it to begin with.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think as far as context go, context is ever widening, and AI applicable to handle greater and greater spheres of context over time. So yeah, you're right that most of the applications are specific, but so is a lot of analytics. Even basic analytics, even the hindsight-oriented analytics, the diagnostic analytics, predictive analytics is all very contextual as well. You're talking about a world where you've got a pseudo sentient kind of application that can take into account every kind of context. Well, that would be wonderful for some kind of general purpose use case, but probably not to solve particular business applications.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah.
And then I guess the second part of that question is then, and Theresa, you were starting to get into some of this, but what are those skill sets that I should be looking for, or an employer should be looking for in data scientists that, will translate, that won't just be automated away over the next few years?
I want to hit something too
Yeah.
before I start that answer to that. It's something
Sure.
that you said at the very beginning, Noah, when you were talking about what you do, which is training people and on this particular way. That's going to become much more important because we're all going to have to grasp this idea of lifelong learning. It's not just this program that you need or this skill set that you need and this certification and you're done. It's going to be a continuous drumbeat of new information that we need. Against that then, when you need what you need for AI are not a skill set. You need to be able to collaborate with people that have a variety of skill sets, because nothing is going to be done by an individual data scientist. It's going to be done by groups of people. And you're going to have sociologists and psychologists and socioeconomics, and you're going to have all kinds of people in a team to create applications for AI that make a difference. And I think that as you're doing, you're training people to understand certain things, I guess, in your world. That kind of training you're going to have to keep doing. And everybody's going to have to make sure that through collaboration, they share the knowledge that they have to the next person on their team.
Yeah, absolutely. And more specifically, the company I work for is teaching the world to cloud is the tagline. So, both engineers and technical folks who need to be able to translate their skills from, what they've traditionally known to, how does it work in the cloud and what's it called, in AWS or Azure. And just as much, if not more, those without a technical background that want to get involved and, need a modern place to start that, aren't going back to school.
Think about this, though. We act like we need to train for the cloud because the cloud is the last destination.
It's not true at all. Yeah.
It won't be.
Yeah. It's, so that in itself is interesting stuff. Doug, what do you think?
I don't know whether the cloud is the last destination, but it certainly is the destination right now. Either cloud only or cloud hybrid kinds of solutions are certainly dominating. 80% of our work is at Caserta is done in a cloud environment. Now, one of the things that we're very concerned about is when we migrate to the cloud is not just doing a brute force migration, but being architecturally diligent, I guess, to understand how that data is going to be used in new and innovative ways. What are the new kinds of value streams that are being generated from that data, and then architecting the move to the cloud in a way that accommodates that. Yeah.
So what are the skills or roles that you see, Doug, that will be, even more important than they are today, let's say in 5 years?
Yeah, they say, the data scientist is the sexiest job of the 21st century, right? Well, maybe, not so sexy, but, maybe close behind are data curators. Most companies have an entire department dedicated to procuring all variety of assets, whether it's office supplies or widgets or whatever. But most companies don't have even a single person dedicated to identifying what kinds of data assets might be available and beneficial to the organization from outside the organization. There are 10 million data sets published by government organizations around the world. There are billions of websites with data that can be harvested. There's billions of social media posts probably per day. There are thousands of data brokers out there, an emerging set of data marketplaces like Dowex and others. And so, who in your organization is heads up to all of that data and able to make intelligent decisions about whether that data is potentially beneficial to the organization, and then make it available to a data scientist and who can then integrate it. Especially right now, given the economic situation, most companies who have relied on trend-based forecast models that really can just kind of stare at their own navel and look at their own data, those models are entirely broken right now.
Yeah.
And our clients are scrambling to create what are called more driver-based models that take into consideration what kinds of external factors are leading indicators of your own business.
Okay.
One manufacturer leads to the supply of another manufacturer and so forth. So understanding that supply chain, the value, the demand chain as well, is really the only way to create a practicable forecast today.
Yeah.
And that all takes a lot of external data and somebody who knows where that data is, how to get access to it, how to contract it, to get access, how to integrate it, and so forth. So that role of a data curator, or whatever you want to call it, some people call it a data wrangler, is really, really important right now.
It's almost like having the librarian, and it is somebody who can manage it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm constantly.
That's why I use the term curator. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm constantly reminded that the agency, the company that predicted where the spread of the coronavirus would go, was a company that was an analytics company, but the guy who owned it decided that he needed airline data, which no one would have thought to combine, actually. So he had bought almost a year ago, before all of this happened, he'd bought a lot of the airline data. And he applied it to what he was finding with the virus and could pinpoint almost immediately, based on flight schedules, where the next outbreak would be.
Yeah.
It's thinking about the different sources, or it's weather data applied to grocery stores, or anything like that. Is that you're absolutely right. Acquiring data sets is going to be a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
What would make someone qualified to be a data curator?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
It's like, I'll raise my hand. I'll do it. It sounds like it pays well.
I think Theresa nailed it. Librarian type skills.
A librarian.
I would hire somebody who's a librarian who knows how to identify informational assets. I mean, most librarians today are not just concerned with books. There are all manner of
content.
Content, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah.
It's the content management of the world, and we haven't. We're creating lots more of that than we've ever done. Not just the data, but the content itself.
Yeah. So the library sciences are here to stay.
So that's one. I mean, the other role, of course, is really important, is the data engineer, somebody who can do that data once the data is identified, get it integrated and cleansed and prepared as necessary. And to have your data scientist responsible for doing that, that's the fastest way to lose your data scientist, is to make them responsible for data engineering.
Been there.
Yeah.
Is that component that you just described that a data engineer would be responsible for, is that one that you could see being automated and done more by machines?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm more of a Luddite than I think Theresa is on that one.
No,
There's a lot of manual effort that goes into data integration and cleansing and preparation.
That's where I'm seeing a lot of the rise in tools, where the tools are actually being used. And quite frankly, they're using AI to do it. They're using AI to manage that flux of data, to pull it together, to integrate it. So the more they do that, the faster and better those tools are going to become.
Yeah, that's
The
interesting that,
problem is that convincing someone you need to pay attention to it to begin with is the big
Right.
issue.
Yeah.
yeah.
I think the other role we'll see is a storyteller. So let's look at the
Exactly.
usage side of the equation. Data scientists are typically not very good at, don't always have the best communication skills, right?
Hmm.
Even though that's one of the things that we see companies asking for, in addition to the kind of the core skills of being able to develop hypotheses and do analytics, and is that ability to communicate the results, collaborate with others, have some creativity and discipline, and a passion for data. But really, communication was the number one soft skill that we found when we researched this, and it's just not really the forte of a lot of data scientists. And so having somebody on the team, this is why we often recommend a team-based approach to data science. Having somebody who could communicate the results and tie them into the business. And even more so than somebody to engineer the algorithm that's been developed or the model that's been developed into the business in some kind of automated fashion is important as well. And again, asking your data scientist to engineer analytic output into an application, don't do it.
Yeah.
Yep.
One of the hottest fields right now is AI ML ops. In other words, how do you manage the algorithms back into the applications where they can actually be used to create the value you said they would do to begin with? I think it's even Courtney who's been told, that of all of the AI applications that are out there, people spend millions of dollars and then never see any value for the applications that they put in place because they lose interest or they're not integrated into the solutions that they intended to be.
And for data science in particular, it helps to think about data science as like an R&D function, a research and development function. And what are the things that you would or wouldn't have your research and development function do? That's probably how you want to scope the data science role.
Right. But we have all got experience with large companies that have great R&D and could never get the R&D out of the lab. Xerox comes to mind immediately, as they had all this great capability but couldn't make that transition.
Yeah, IBM is year after year files more patents than any other company, but I don't know, do you hear about that many innovations from IBM?
No, you don't.
I'm not, no,
you don't.
not disparaging IBM, great company, but if you do look at the ratio of patents versus an actual commercial innovations, it's a bit out of whack. Yeah.
So with the theme of hiring data scientists and skills that may be relevant now and not so relevant in the future, the other piece of it that I'm curious about is, how do I know that I'm asking the right questions, that I'm hiring the right data scientists, not only for their skills, but the ethics of it? So you kind of started to hit on this, Theresa. You have to first care, about where the data is coming from and where it's going. And to me, that gets into an ethical type of conversation. So, how do we start to vet for that properly?
That's a really interesting question. I'm going to answer it kind of strangely because I think you have to do a whole bunch of soul searching on your own to figure out what you really want on the team before you go looking. And your own integrity about how you manage situations comes into play. So I don't know. I've known a lot and hired a lot of great data scientists. For the most part, most of them were ethical about what they wanted to do with the data and how they wanted to do the applications. And they understood the power that they had at their fingertips. How did I know that? It's because they had been successful before they came to me. So I don't know. I think it's a tough question. How about you, Doug? What do you think?
I think the quickest way to eliminate a candidate data scientist from contention is ask them to describe the scientific method.
That is true.
Can't articulate the scientific method has no business calling themselves a
data scientist,
any kind of scientist, let alone a data scientist. And that may be a little bit callous, but seriously, if you don't understand the whole process of generating a hypothesis and the methods for generating a hypothesis, for collecting the data to test the hypothesis, how to test the hypothesis, how to retest it, then you're probably not a great data scientist. But and then the other thing I would say is I would ask them to describe the business benefits of various kinds of scientific methods, right?
Mhm.
Without getting technical, you explain to our CEO why supervised versus unsupervised learning, is a benefit for certain kinds of solutions, right? Or describe a multivariate regression analysis in layman's terms to me. And if they can, if they can do that and connect those technical concepts to business outcomes, then you might have a winner on your hands.
And what's really to that point, you're absolutely right. What's really to that point is that I see a lot of people hiring against the tool list that they know, which is absolutely won't get you what you need.
Yeah.
In the short term,
see that.
perhaps.
Short term, yeah.
Yeah, which goes back to the lifelong learning piece. I think the old school mentality of what's on your resume, what have you done, what systems have you used before, like you said, that may be somewhat valuable, especially in the short term, but just because you haven't used a certain application before, it's a really interesting disqualifier.
Another question I like to ask is, tell me how something that you may have developed in one industry could be applied to another industry. So I want them to be able to think horizontally across industries. Yes, it's great to have somebody who is knowledgeable about the business issues and the types of data that's generated within a particular industry, but to be able to bring ideas from another industry and apply them, what are some kind of algorithms or advanced analytics from retail that might be applicable in the manufacturing industry? I'd love to have somebody like that on my team.
The other thing I used to always look at when I reviewed people's resumes was if they played an instrument or they had an art kind of capability in their background. So that was a very interesting way of looking at people too. Because if they played an instrument, they had all the kind of programming capability you would need, and they were creative enough, usually to do exactly what you said, Doug, to move from one industry to the other. They were flexible.
Yeah, there's great examples of this, how there's a company that identified that seismic algorithms could be used to identify crime patterns in a city. And so they've applied that in the city of Los Angeles, and where they've been able to reduce violent crimes by 30%.
My gosh. See there? Crossover industries for sure.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I think those examples are exactly where humans will still be the most valuable, in general, when people have these questions about, is the automation replacing my job? Is the AI going to take my job?
That is right, because you can't replace human creativity right now. There is nothing in a 1 and a 0 that is going to get you to replace creativity, despite what Netflix shows will convince you of.
Right. Yeah, and something I've struggled to maybe understand is the concept of a license or a professional certification. To answer the prior question of how do you know if they are ethical and if they're the right person. You can't become an architect and design buildings without getting the proper licensing. Obviously, driver's license is example, or an attorney, right? You have to pass the bar exam. So, is it applicable for data scientists and the like to have some type of equivalent of that?
Well, let's just be clear. Passing the bar does not make you an ethical attorney.
Well, fair enough. Fair enough. Maybe a bad example.
Yeah. So what you're talking about is a certification for their ethics. I don't know. Unless you're going to be a priest or a rabbi, I don't know that there's any certification for that.
Or a certification.
But it might not be, it might not be a bad course to take as part of an overall certification. I think often about, I have a friend who's an actuary, and was always amazed at the ringer that they have to go through to get certified, and the years and years of coursework.
Yeah, it's very hard.
Just to do risk, analysis for insurance in the insurance industry, a lot of certification that goes into that. And I think that's probably would be a good idea to differentiate data science from other kinds of analytics, to have some degree of certification that and include some coursework on ethics. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got to be part of. We've got to get the universities to start putting that in as part of the curriculums, or people who are going to certify in different areas, like in your cloud area or for data scientists. There are a couple of organizations out there that certify scientists, data scientists.
Yeah, I love the actuary example. I hadn't thought of that one, but I have a friend that went through that, and it's years and years of studying and exams, and then also a certified financial planner came to mind as you were saying that. I mean, there's a lot of rigor to get those credentials, and it would be I guess a little bit more reassuring to know that your data scientist had gone through that kind of testing process.
No guarantees, but at least it makes it better.
Yeah, it's one step, right?
Yeah.
So those were the questions that I had set out for today. But before we wrap up, I like to ask a broad question that I think gets some interesting answers. What is the one thing that the average person should be aware of or know about technology? And it's intentionally open-ended because it brings up some interesting things, whether that's data or something else. But to your reference earlier to Black Mirror, all of us in popular culture see all of these potential, so-called potential risks of technology, and sometimes maybe worrying about the wrong things, or not focused on the right things. So, whichever wants to take a stab at that one first. If you could tell someone one thing to be mindful of with technology, what would it be?
The thing I would say is it's not going away. So you've got to get used to it.
Yeah, and I think that definitely is something I deal with a lot in the cloud. Did we just lose Doug?
Yeah.
He may have lost the connection, or he just didn't like the question. Who knows?
That's a tough one.
I know it was open-ended, but I didn't think it was offensive. No, but yeah, we can chat while he's logging back in, hopefully. But yeah, it's definitely something we struggle with the cloud is, exactly what you just said. It's not going away. It's just a matter of evolution, and some companies are further along than others, but trying to fight it or do things to the contrary, it's a lot of wasted energy. And I think I have to let him in. He's knocking.
We didn't know if you didn't like the question or not.
As soon as he asked the question
in?
about technology, my internet crapped out. So
yeah, I said I didn't realize it was offensive, but maybe I should stop asking that one.
Yeah.
But no, that is funny. Your internet said I have an answer for that. How about?
Yeah, I've got an answer. Bye-bye.
How about Wi-Fi?
Wi-Fi. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
So I don't know. The thing about technology is I've got this harebrained hypothesis that the role of IT ought to be bifurcated separately into information and technology.
That's a good point.
For too long, we've been managing and thinking about and talking about IT as a single entity, and that's probably an artifact of most technologies of the tight coupling between data and technology over the years. Today, we're in a world where we can have a computing process over here and the data over here and the hardware over there, and so that notion of it being tightly coupled is no longer valid. And we've even seen some. We've seen the emergence of the chief data officer to take on responsibilities for the data. And I think we'll probably see a world where the role of the CIO either goes away or turns into one that's either more focused on managing technology or managing data separately.
Yeah.
And
I think you're already sort of seeing that, especially with the chief data officer. You're seeing a lot of combinations of the chief data analytics officer. The data is being used to get to the final result, which is the analytics. So I think that the organizations are trying to figure that out. But I agree with you, Doug. The split between I and T, That should be something everybody does.
Good. It would help companies manage their technology better. It would help them manage their data better if they split IT into separate
Well,
departments.
every CIO I've ever worked for never understood the value of data within his infrastructure organization.
Right. Technology is on the balance sheet, right? Or on the expense sheet if you're renting, right?
And you
But
depreciate
but
it.
data has no place anywhere on financials unless you're selling data outright. It doesn't show up anywhere on your financial statements, even though I argue it meets the criteria of an asset. It's something that's owned and controlled, exchangeable for cash, and generates what accountants call probable future economic benefits. The accounting profession hasn't come around to recognizing data as an asset, and because of that, we sort of discount its value in organizations. We don't treat it like an asset. We don't manage it like an asset. And so.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, those are great answers. Despite you trying to escape, Doug, I'm glad you were able to get back on and give us that answer. And I'm glad you got to the chief data officer part of it, because as you were talking about the decoupling, that's immediately what I thought is there's a CIO for the I and a CTO for the T. So it's been decoupled in terms of that level for
most CIOs, have long operated as if their middle name is infrastructure, not information.
That's exactly right.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's why the role of the CDO has emerged.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you both for taking some time to chat with me today.
Well, thank you, Noah. We appreciate it.
Noah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. It's great to see you, Doug.
You. All right.
Have a great rest of your day.
All right. Cheers. Bye.